Some crime scenes scream the truth. Others whisper it. This one was lying. It was 3:12 a.m. when I got the call. A woman in her early 40s, Amanda Valila, found dead in her apartment in Villa Mariana. A neighbor heard a scream, followed by a loud crash. When the officers arrived, the front door was open, lights on, and Amanda was lying face down at the foot of her stairs. The official theory? A fatal fall. The first thing that bothered me was the position of the body. Her right leg was twisted unnaturally, yes, consistent with falling, but her hands were curled up as if she was holding something. And she had blood under her fingernails, not from the head injury, but from someone else. And then I saw it, a small blood smear on the kitchen floor, almost invisible, white but not well, and it was at least 6 meters away from the staircase. That detail changed everything. Trigger 1. Blood only tells the truth if you let it settle. And here it was trying to hide. The crime scene team found no signs of forced entry. The door was unlocked, which could mean she knew the person who came in, or she forgot to lock it, though Amanda was known to be obsessive about security. Her windows were all closed. No sign of a struggle, yet her nails were chipped, her blouse torn slightly under the arm. There was something here, something that didn't match the accident theory. The blood near the kitchen had already started to coagulate when I swabbed it. That meant it had been there before she died. But Amanda was found far from that spot. The blood wasn't hers. Not a drop of it. We ran DNA. Male, unknown, not in any police database. But that stain, that one mistake, told me someone had bled in her house, probably in a quiet fight, and then staged the body near the stairs. And that's where things got strange. Her home security system had been disabled manually. Not hacked, not broken. Someone who knew the code had turned it off. The last log entry? Exactly 40 minutes before the time of death. Amanda's phone had been taken, but her laptop was left behind, hidden under the couch. We recovered it. In the trash bin, she'd recently deleted a PDF titled Lease Agreement, 2018. It looked like nothing, but inside the metadata, it had been edited recently with added notes. And one comment caught my attention. He's using a fake name. He's lying to the agency. What else is he hiding? The lease was for a man named Bruno Estevez. No known relation to Amanda. But digging deeper, we found that Bruno had been renting the apartment above hers for just 2 months. No social media. No digital trail prior to that year. Trigger 2. Predators create shadows, not footprints. We visited the apartment above. Empty, unfurnished, but there was dust, and the kind of marks furniture legs leave when dragged away quickly. Someone had cleared the place in a hurry. Under the bathroom sink, hidden behind the drain pipe, I found a small towel soaked with dried blood. The lab matched it to the same unknown male DNA found in Amanda's kitchen. He lived above her. They had contact. And at some point, maybe confrontation, he bled. Her sister confirmed that Amanda had been worried, said someone had been following her, a man who was too friendly in the elevator. Once, she told her sister, he knew what time she got home, without asking. Amanda had tried reporting it, but with no physical threats or evidence. She was told to stay alert. She did more than that. She started investigating him herself. That was her mistake. Trigger 3. When you get too close to fire, you learn who lit it. Bruno, if that was his real name, was already gone. Cameras showed him leaving the building 6 hours before Amanda's body was discovered. We believe he staged the scene to delay discovery, making it look accidental. The cut that bled in her kitchen? Probably from a struggle. Amanda might have defended herself, scratched him, hence the blood under her nails. But he won, and after he killed her, he tried to cover his tracks. He cleaned the blood. He tossed her phone. He dragged her body. And most people would have believed the fall. But he didn't expect us to find the blood in the wrong place. That one mistake unraveled the whole lie. His real name was Lucas Barreto, a con man with a history of fraud. Last known address in Goiânia. He had multiple identities. No one knew where he was now. He vanished. The case remains open, but the investigation is still active. And I still keep that photo, the small blood smear near the kitchen tile, as a reminder, because in forensics, you don't just look at what they want you to see. You look at what doesn't fit. And in Amanda's case, the story wasn't told by her fall. It was told by the blood that wasn't supposed to be there. There are cases where everything seems to make sense at first glance. A locked window, a single set of footprints, and no sign of forced entry. But when something feels too perfect, I've learned to dig deeper. It was a rainy Tuesday morning when I was called to a quiet apartment in the Liberté district. The victim was Eduardo Farias, a 35-year-old financial analyst, found dead in his study, shot once in the head. No struggle, no mess. The door to the study was locked from the inside, so it was the only window. At first glance, it screamed suicide. The gun was in his right hand. The trajectory of the bullet made sense, temple to temple, and the security cameras in the building's hallway showed no one entering or leaving in the last 12 hours. But the first rule in forensic work is simple. Never trust the surface. I examined the room carefully. Eduardo's desk was in order. His computer was on, and a document titled Last Note was open. It was a short message, 3 lines. I can't take this anymore. I failed everyone. Please forgive me. Tell my mother I love her. It was just too standard. Trigger 1. Suicides rarely follow a script, especially in cold, clinical tones. His coffee mug was still half full. The coffee had traces of sedative, heavy, pharmaceutical grade, not over-the-counter stuff. But there were no prescription bottles in the room. Odd for someone about to end their life. Then I saw it. The window, locked from the inside, like everything else, had condensation marks. That wouldn't be unusual on a rainy morning. But something was off. The pattern of the moisture. It had clearly been opened recently, then shut again. And one fingerprint, barely visible on the metal handle, was smudged downward, not upward. Someone had closed that window from the outside. Trigger 2. If the exit disappears, it doesn't mean no one left. It means they covered their tracks. I asked for the building's blueprints. The study window faced a narrow inner courtyard. No balcony. No fire escape. But one detail caught my attention. A maintenance cable running from the roof to the utilities access 2 floors below. It wasn't meant for people, but it could support weight. And I remembered Eduardo's shoes. Dry, perfectly clean, which wouldn't be possible if he had walked to the study window from the wet living room floor. But the sill of the window was wet. Someone had entered or exited through that window while it was raining. So the scenario was this. Someone climbs down from the roof using the maintenance line, enters through the unlocked window, drugs Eduardo, writes the note, shoots him in the head, and leaves the way they came, locking the window behind them. But why? Eduardo's financial records revealed the answer. He was part of a private investment group that had been laundering money through offshore accounts. He had started cooperating with an internal audit, quietly, secretly, and someone had noticed. Trigger 3. Money doesn't kill. Fear of losing it does. A single encrypted email on his computer had been deleted and partially recovered. It was a warning. You're about to make a mistake you won't live to regret. From who? That took longer. We traced the IP to a proxy server in Chile, then through a pattern of use that matched a former associate, Rodrigo Veloso, who disappeared from the company 2 years earlier after a financial scandal. No arrest, no trace. Until now, Rodrigo had motive. He had been implicated but never charged, and Eduardo's cooperation would bring everything back. The question wasn't whether Rodrigo had a reason. It was how he pulled it off. Our answer came from a tiny, almost invisible clue. Fiber residue on the floor beneath the window. Not just any fiber. It was part of a climbing glove. One designed for wet grip. The kind used by professionals who rappel down buildings. We interviewed rooftop maintenance staff. One man said he saw a worker on the roof the morning before the body was found, but assumed it was scheduled. The man wore a vest, helmet, and harness. No face seen. No name taken. It was a disguise. Rodrigo had used the maintenance access rep held down, entered through the unlocked window, kill Eduardo, and vanish. He cleaned his prints. He locked the window behind him. The scene was perfect, silent, precise. But the condensation told the truth. The fingerprints angle, the direction of the smear, the coffee with no prescription, the dry shoes, the fake suicide note, the fiber, all of it added up. Small details, tiny cracks in a perfect illusion. Rodrigo was never officially caught, but we submitted our findings to Interpol. A red notice was issued, and a year later, a man with a fake ID was detained in Lisbon for passport fraud. No one proved it was Rodrigo, but I have no doubt, because sometimes what makes a crime scene suspicious isn't the blood, it's the fact that everything looks exactly how it's supposed to. The first time I stepped into that apartment, I knew something was off. Not because of what I saw, but because of what I didn't. The place belonged to Renata Azevedo, a 62-year-old widow who had just returned from a weekend in the countryside. She opened her door and immediately knew she'd been robbed. But instead of chaos, drawers turned inside out and things tossed on the floor, she found cleanliness. Too much of it. Her living room was spotless. Not tidy, not organized, sterile, like a hotel suite after housekeeping. Remote controls aligned, sofa cushions plumped just right. Even the coffee table showed no dust. The air had that distinct scent of lemon-scented ammonia. Her first instinct wasn't that someone broke in. It was that someone cleaned her apartment while she was gone. Then she realized her jewelry box was missing, along with some cash she kept in a kitchen drawer and her late husband's antique Omega watch. Only personal, easily concealed items. No TV, no laptop, no silverware. A thief who stole with surgical precision and cleaned after. That's where I came in. At first glance, it looked like the thief left no trace. And that was already suspicious. In real crime scenes, even the most careful intruders leave footprints, physical or behavioral. Here it was almost too clean, and that was a mistake. Trigger one. When a scene looks perfect, look for what shouldn't be missing. I started with the floor. Every surface had been wiped down, but only to waist height. Above that, the bookshelves had a thin, untouched layer of dust. Why would someone clean everything, except the top of the shelves? Because the thief didn't care about dust. They only cared about fingerprints. That's when I found it. A tiny smudge on the wall near the doorframe, almost invisible. Not a fingerprint, but the trail of a glove thumb, left while the intruder closed the door quietly. I lifted the residue. It had traces of glass cleaner, not something people usually carry around unless they plan to wipe everything. I turned to the bedroom. Renata's wardrobe was untouched, but her vanity table was different. The jewelry box was gone, but the mirror had also been wiped down, except one corner. That corner held a faint fog print, like someone had leaned over, exhaled, and forgotten to clean that last spot. Trigger 2. You can clean the surface, but not the air around you. Then came the weirdest part. I checked under her bed, not for evidence, but for dust. There wasn't any, at all, not even hair. Forensics 101. In a lived-in home, the underside of furniture always holds micro debris. Not here. The thief had cleaned under the furniture. Not to be kind, to make sure nothing of them remained. Why such caution? We pulled the building's CCTV footage. The main hallway camera had a blank window, 30 minutes of static. Technical failure, they said, but I've seen that trick before. The system was looped using a portable transmitter. A pro-level move, not a junkie or first-time burglar. Someone who knew what they were doing. Still, Renata swore no one else knew she'd be gone. She didn't post online, didn't tell her neighbors. The countryside trip had been last minute, so I asked for her trash bin. It had been emptied, bleached, again, too clean. Then I found a torn receipt behind her fridge, likely fallen there by accident. It was from a pet shop, dated 2 days before her trip. She had taken her cat to boarding. That meant someone who knew her routine or saw her with a pet carrier realized the apartment would be empty. Trigger 3. Criminals don't need a key. They just need a pattern. We started looking at people around her. Doorman, cleaners, neighbors. That's when the pieces came together. A man named Leandro, 28, had cleaned apartments in the building 2 years prior, including Renata's, until he was dismissed. Clean record on paper. But I remembered a detail from an old robbery case. A small crew that hit apartments by copying building keys, using cleaning jobs as a front. Never caught, but their signature? No mess. Always too clean. We visited Leandro's new job under a fake water leak complaint. In his locker, folded in a gym bag, we found a microfiber cloth with trace particles matching the ammonia used in Renata's home. And the kicker? A USB signal jammer. The same kind that can disable hallway cameras temporarily. No fingerprints. No DNA. But the fibers, the cloth, the camera interference pattern, the behavior, all connected. We couldn't prosecute him on that alone. But he knew we were close. 2 days later, Renata received an envelope under her door. Inside, her husband's Omega watch. No note, no explanation. Why return it? Because Leandro wasn't just a thief. He was obsessive, about precision, about silence, about control. The idea that we'd found anything, even one smudge, probably drove him mad. It wasn't guilt. It was perfectionism. He needed to believe he left no trace. But here's the truth. The more you try to erase yourself from a crime scene, the more your absence becomes your signature. There are cases that stay with you not because of what you saw, but because of what someone wanted you to feel. It was a quiet Tuesday when I got the call. A man had been found dead in his bathroom. His name was Bruno Lamy, 41 years old, successful architect, lived alone in a high-end apartment downtown. No history of mental health issues. No signs of forced entry. The initial report called it suicide, but something fell off. The body was found seated on the floor, back against the wall, a razor blade in his right hand, deep cuts on his left wrist. The kind of scene that forensic techs sadly know too well. But this one was too neat. No struggle, no broken glass. A clean, polished mirror directly across from where he sat. And right on that mirror, written in something red, not blood, "I'm sorry I failed you." At first glance, it seemed like a textbook suicide. But when you've seen as many scenes as I have, you learn that the most important clues aren't the ones that scream. They're the ones that whisper. Trigger 1. In suicide scenes, it's not just what was done, it's how it was done. I crouched near the body. Blood flow was consistent with the wounds, and livor mortis matched the position. But the razor blade, sterilized, brand new, no fingerprints. Not even Bruno's. That was my first red flag. Second, the handwriting on the mirror, it looked shaky, emotional, but the message was written from left to right, as if written while facing away from the mirror. That's not how people write goodbye messages on mirrors. They look directly into it. They want to see themselves as they say goodbye. Whoever wrote this, wrote it for someone else to find, not as a genuine last message. I asked to see Bruno's last 48 hours. His phone showed regular texts with a woman named Elisa. Short, polite, no emotional distress. His last message was, "Good luck on the project today." Nothing dramatic. Nothing that screamed finality. So I asked to speak with Elisa. She told me they had broken up 3 weeks prior. Mutually. No arguments. She said he had taken it well. Still friends. Even shared a dog custody schedule. I believed her until I noticed something odd. When I asked if she had been to his apartment recently, she said not since the breakup, but the coffee cup in his sink had her lipstick on it. Trigger 2. The truth often hides in the objects people forget. We dusted the bathroom for prints. Nothing on the mirror, nothing on the blade. Nothing on the doorknob, just Bruno's on the faucet. Everything had been wiped, except for one overlooked spot, the back of the toilet lid. One perfect partial print. It was Elisa's. She cracked quickly when confronted, but the truth was worse than I expected. Elisa hadn't killed him. Bruno really had taken his own life, but not spontaneously. He had invited her over the night before, told her he was ready to move on, asked for a final dinner. She agreed. When she left, he said he'd get some sleep. But here's what happened. Elisa came back the next morning to drop off the dog. The door was unlocked. She found him already dead, and instead of calling for help, she cleaned the scene, wiped everything she had touched, and wrote the mirror message. Why? Because she blamed herself. She thought their breakup pushed him over the edge. She didn't want it to look like a fight. She didn't want anyone to blame her, so she made it look like he blamed himself. The message was her guilt, not his. Trigger 3. Sometimes a cover-up isn't to hide a crime. It's to rewrite a narrative. We pulled surveillance footage. Confirmed she re-entered the apartment at 7:23 a.m., left again at 7:42. That's when she wiped everything. It's hard to explain this to people. Forensics isn't always about catching a killer. Sometimes it's about understanding pain so deeply buried that it shows up in how someone positions a cup or the direction they write on a mirror. Bruno's real goodbye wasn't written in red ink. It was in the silence of his apartment, in the neatly folded laundry, in the untouched dinner for two he'd made and never served. And that's what I told Elisa. She didn't need to erase her guilt. She needed to understand that sometimes people choose silence not because of others, but because they've already said everything they could of themselves. The mirror wasn't his farewell. It was hers. Some crime scenes scream for attention. Others whisper so softly. It takes instinct to know they're not what they seem. This was one of those. The call came in at 3:14 a.m. A neighbor had reported a foul odor in an old apartment complex in the industrial part of town. It wasn't unusual, abandoned units, leaks, pests. But this time, the smell was coming from apartment 302, and the tenant hadn't been seen in nearly a week. When I arrived, the building manager was already there, holding his nose with cloth and mumbling something about rotting meat. The hallway reeked of decay. But the real story started behind that locked door. Inside, the apartment was dark, humid, and silent. I stepped in and instantly felt the familiar heaviness that always comes with death. The source wasn't hard to find. Lying face down near the kitchenette was the body of a man in his late 30s. ID said his name was Renato Freitas, a freelance IT technician. No signs of forced entry. No weapons. No struggle. At first glance, it looked like a sudden natural death. Maybe cardiac arrest. Maybe overdose. The paramedics were already on their way to collect the body for autopsy. Routine. But something didn't sit right. I crouched beside him and noticed a strange detail. His shoes were missing. Not removed, but missing. The soles of his socks were pristine. No dust. No sign he had walked around barefoot. And more importantly, his cell phone was on the table, but the screen had a crack shaped like a tiny impact ring. Trigger 1. Dead men don't clean their socks, and phones don't crack themselves. The apartment had only one entrance, and all windows were closed. No signs of violence, no defensive wounds. But when I stepped into the living room, I saw it. Just a few inches above the sofa, in the plaster ceiling, was a small, circular hole, barely noticeable. Maybe the size of a coin, but it was too clean, too round. I've seen bullet holes, electrical damage, water leaks. This was none of them. This was deliberate. I asked the building manager if anyone lived directly above. He nodded. Apartment 402, right above the living room. A man named Carlos Nunez, quiet guy, kept to himself. We knocked. No answer. We used the master key. Inside, everything looked normal until I looked at the floor. Right over the same spot as the hole below, the wooden floor had a fresh patch of putty. The kind you use to cover drilled holes. It hadn't even dried properly. That's when I knew we were looking at something far from natural. Trigger 2. If you want to kill someone without entering their home, all you need is gravity and precision. We detained Carlos that same morning. Under pressure, the story unfolded. Renato and Carlos weren't strangers. They had a long-standing feud over noise, unpaid bills, and a lawsuit over a stolen laptop Renato claimed Carlos had taken. The court date was just a week away. Carlos, a former military technician with experience in engineering, had a plan. He drilled a hole through his floor, perfectly aligned with the ceiling below. He knew Renato's routine. Every night, he sat on the same couch around midnight. Carlos timed it for days, until the moment he lowered a metallic rod, sharpened like a spike, down through the hole. One precise strike, directly into the back of Renato's neck. Silent, surgical, and he pulled the rod back up instantly. But something went wrong. When he withdrew the rod, it hit the ceiling edge on the way up, leaving behind a chip of plaster, barely visible, but enough for a trained eye to catch. And that phone, Renato had dropped it during the impact, cracking it as he fell. Another silent witness. Trigger 3. Even the cleanest murders leave messy truths. Carlos thought he had planned the perfect murder. No weapon on site, no fingerprints, no break-in. But he hadn't counted on the weight of gravity, revealing his secret through a tiny, forgotten hole. Renato's shoes were found later, in Carlos's apartment. He had taken them to make it look like Renato had been outside before dying, hoping to suggest a random accident or fainting spell after returning home. But the body tells the truth, and so does the ceiling. We charge Carlos with premeditated murder using an unconventional weapon. It was one of the strangest cases I ever worked, and one of the quietest. No blood, no screams, just a hole. And a man who thought if no one saw it happen, no one would know. But crime has a way of echoing through walls, and in this case, through ceilings.